Okay, good evening. Glad everybody's here tonight. Thank you for your emails throughout the week. It was really good to get some feedback from people, and very excited to know where people would like the course to go. One of the requests that I had a lot of people comment on was a request to study the issues of power and consent in Gentleman Jack. Now, this is actually a huge topic if we're going to cover it thoroughly and look closely and carefully at the entire series. So it can't be covered in its entirety in a reasonable amount of time and still be comprehensive. So what I'd like to do first tonight is very briefly treat the issue of power dynamics in Gentleman Jack more generally, and then how these dynamics operate in the relationship between Anne Lister and Anne Walker, and segue from there into a discussion of intimate partner consent in episodes 1 through 3 specifically. Questions of power and agency are central to any good narrative. In Gentleman Jack, they're completely inescapable, given the time period, the subject matter, and the personalities involved. In 1830s Halifax, power is multivalent. It expresses itself along more than one continuum at once, of which the most prominent is social class and social standing. But the matrix of power includes the axes of wealth, age, gender, marital status, position within society, position within the family and the household, and employment situation. An agency, the ability to choose one's actions for any particular individual, is circumscribed by these asymmetrical power relationships of which every single person is a part. In Gentleman Jack, we have the unparalleled delight of observing as the indomitable Anne Lister manipulates these power dynamics, and as Anne Walker expands her power of agency over the course of 8 episodes. Consent, meanwhile, and the ability to give consent is in effect the main storyline of Gentleman Jack. Anne Lister's goal is to find a woman to be her wife, and marriage is impossible outside a framework of consent. So even though the question of marriage in Gentleman Jack is framed as a yes or no, will she or won't she, the show does an admirable job of making us aware of the complexities of consent, even if it doesn't model it perfectly all the time. And as always, it does so through a uniquely female lens. Now, I am, as in every topic of discussion relating to our source material, deeply indebted to the work of Mertzman and Schwartz, whose corpus I hope you continue to review, and in particular their classic July 2019 study, Collarbones of Consent, and the discourse that's followed from that seminal work. I also continue the tradition of differentiating the Annes when I'm speaking about them out loud, not simply as Anne Lister or Anne Walker, but as Big Anne and Little Anne, which perhaps in itself illustrates our understanding of their power relationship, although as we'll see, that changes over the course of the series. It's also very important at this juncture that I acknowledge the excellent work of my research assistants in selecting or capturing the images that I'm using in this lecture. Mertzman herself, of course, is not only a talented scholar, but also a GIF creator, as is Ira Dreamer on Tumblr. My research assistants, Livia, Jessica, Tana, and Chantel, were invaluable to me in preparing the slides today, so my heartfelt thanks to them. The Listers of Shibden Hall enjoy a certain prominence in 1830s Halifax society because of their position as one of the oldest families in Halifax, according to Eliza Priestley. Their oddities may incur gossip, but they don't necessarily tarnish their reputation in local society. Now, Anne Lister, as the unmarried landowner of Shibden, answers to nobody within her family, not even her own father. Samuel Washington's question about whom he would be answerable to as her land steward is answered unhesitatingly: me, first and last. Of course, as we know, she also effortlessly transgresses the power dynamic of the gender binary, refusing to be cowed by societal expectations for her dress, her speech, or her behavior. She is nothing but agency from the moment we first see her, literally at the reins of the high flyer. Hashtag HNNG. So perhaps it's all the more frustrating that she can't get command of her love life, getting into scrapes with women like Vere Hobart, failing to influence her into making Anne a companion for life, or to convince Mariana Lawton to leave the comforts and advantages of her marriage in order to be with Anne, hashtag when Charles dies. Yes, Chantal, did you have something you wanted to say? Right. Okay. So these are all very, very good points. And I would encourage you to come to office hours and we can talk more about this subject. You might actually, Chantal, want to write your final paper on the topic of Mariana Lawton. I think that you would do an excellent job with that. But let's save this discussion for another lecture. Meanwhile, Anne Walker's power as the heiress of the Walker estate is latent in the first portion of the series. Her ability to make choices has been kept in a state of atrophy by her overbearing relatives and also perhaps by the restraints of her own emotional and physical infirmities. In the first episode, she's virtually silent the first 3 times we see her. Even during a medical visit from Dr. Kenny, the conversation about her health and treatment is effectively conducted without her, as Dr. Kenny and the elder Anne Walker discuss her in the 3rd person. She needs taking out of herself, says Dr. Kenny, but at this point in the series, it's not immediately obvious that there is a self out of which to be taken. Perhaps it's not surprising then that Anne Lister's keen sense of her own power and potential is deeply aroused, pun intended, upon becoming reacquainted with Miss Walker when she and the Priestleys pay a call at Shibden. Little Anne is now older and apparently more attractive than she was when they first met. Now, Lister's body language demonstrates and telegraphs her interest immediately as she makes herself dominant. She takes a seat about an inch from Anne Walker on a bench that could accommodate a lot more personal space, as we can see here. And then on the armrest, with her own arms slung along the back behind little Anne. Big Anne's acquisitive mental calculus identifies Miss Walker as someone who can't even keep track of all the rolling acres and tenants she has. She's the poor girl, she's someone she can make up to. She thinks that she will endeavor to make wealthy little Miss Walker my wife. Wealthy little Miss Walker, my wife. All of that is said in 6 words. The motivation behind her courtship of Anne Walker, her expectation that she, Anne Lister, will control the relationship, and that she will increase her holdings by possessing another person after the pattern of 19th century marriage, even if the conventions of the time don't allow her to do so legally. Now, just a small tangent here. Although for Anne, the thrill of the chase has begun, we know that underneath that wolfish plan lies the soft underbelly of her desire for companionship. We have already heard a statement from Anne Lister that is basically the equivalent of the I Wish song at the beginning of a Disney movie. I thoroughly intend to live with someone I love. I thoroughly intend to spend my evening hour with someone who loves me. And yet, that heartfelt wish is not something that she hopes will be granted by a fairy godmother. It's something that she intends, that she thoroughly intends, as though she could bring it into existence by sheer willpower and energy. The Listers, as previously mentioned, have high standing in Halifax, even if they don't possess anything quite like the Walker fortune. And so it's Big Anne's prerogative to pay call on Anne Walker at Crow Nest. I'm sorry, my mistake. I obviously meant that it's Anne's prerogative to pop in to see Anne Walker since she was just passing, coincidentally dressed to the nines. Hashtag move, I'm gay. But of course, the power dynamic between them is hardly limited to the disparity in family status. Anne Lister is older, better educated, better traveled, more experienced, more physically and arguably mentally fit than Anne Walker. She also already enjoys an exalted position in Anne Walker's estimation, as the younger woman has admired her from afar since perhaps the age of 14, and has treasured the memory of the brief interactions between them. Interactions which obviously Anne Lister also remembers perfectly because she remembers everything. From now on, inasmuch as little Anne Walker has any control over the pace of their growing intimacy, it's because Anne Lister chooses to take her cues from Anne's body language, matching her instantly cue for cue.